You are listening to the Showbiz Side Hustle Podcast, powered by PerformerPreneur. I am your host here, Nicole Louise Geddes, and together we'll be delving into all of the ways that a showbiz side hustle can support you now and long into the future. So sit back, relax, and listen in, and together let's get inspired to take action to create the life, future, and business of your dreams. This episode is sponsored by the Showbiz Side Hustle Handbook, available on Kindle and in paperback over on Amazon. Follow the simple tasks laid out over 3 easy-to-action sections and effectively build a strong business foundation for a successful showbiz side hustle. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Showbiz Side Hustle Podcast, where this week I am bringing in an expert to talk to us about about everything. It's going to be a really interesting, exciting podcast talking about communication, relationships, networks. I mean, what Ellie doesn't know about the things that we need to know. I mean, there's too much. So we'll try our very best to keep everything concise. But Ellie and I are great at these conversations and they do go on and on and on. But anyway, introducing the fabulous Ellie. Please enter to the stage, Ellie. Introduce yourself, your businesses, and then we'll get straight in with the good stuff.
Thank you, Nicole. Lovely to be speaking to you, not in the gym. Normally we're chatting in the gym or, with fielding children. So this is lovely to actually have a proper chat. I run a business called Equipped for Relationships with EQ. I thought it was pretty clever. So it's all about emotional intelligence, skills training. And it came about. I'm a teacher by training, so an English teacher, taught for years, was a pastoral lead, so I did loads of wellbeing stuff. And back 15 years ago, when no one was really talking about it, it just baffled me. There was a kind of just get on with it vibe, or then there's a crisis and send them to therapists. So I did lots of positive psychology, mindfulness stuff in schools. And then at the same time, I did a lot of gender work because I was head of girls, and it just amazed me. And I, talking to my mum, and every generation, there seem to be issues in the dynamics between boys and girls in schools. So I did an MA in that and focused on masculinity again, because everyone was, it was at the point, full-fay feminism, everyone was talking about girls and women, but no one was really talking about men. So I focused quite a lot on that, sort of 2 sides of my triangle. And then at the same time, life coaching, doing loads of relationship stuff with people, trying to work out, in your 30s, what was going on with either your marriages or non-marriages, or, so lots of people type stuff, and it all just seemed to marry together into this idea of emotional intelligence and the fact that actually we're not taught it. So that's where I'm at with my business, is that I try to educate people on these skills that are just so fundamental to everything we do. We're so interconnected, and we're just sort of taught to wing it all the time. And actually, I think it could be much easier. So that was really where it came about. I was like, it kind of could be easier than this. So I go into schools and do workshops with all sorts of people and coach about kind of relational mindsets as well. We kind of live in this world where we're expected to be very individualistic, and actually, if we can learn to work with people much more easily, we will benefit. Whether that's less lonely, our mental health better, our buoyed up by people, we are surrounded by them, we better get on with them. In conclusion.
Brilliant. It's going to be a long one.
I was like going up to an elevator on like the top floor there.
This is amazing. And obviously, listeners, you can hear and see why I've brought Ellie into the podcast at this stage, because we talk, Ellie, loads in the PerformerPreneur community about building communities, about not doing this alone. If you imagine that most of my listeners are performers turned entrepreneurs, there's that kind of segue, which is really difficult because we're taught inherently in the entertainment industry to be competitive, to be individual, to be guarded, because the industry is so saturated. And then in the entrepreneurial world, I'm sure you'll agree as an entrepreneur, it's pretty much the same story. And I just disagree. I think if we can collaborate, if we can communicate, if we can support, if we can learn, if we can listen, then it just becomes so much easier. But I'm doing that on a very surface level, like this is what fills me with joy and glee. And you can obviously explain a little bit more in depth, a little bit more importantly, why that is significant and why that's going to help my community to achieve. Is that a good place to start?
Yeah, great place to start. Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right in that. Like I said, I was working in these kind of very, very high achieving schools, and so dealing with that not in a performing sense, although lots of them were performers, but in a academic performance sense, and it just makes people pretty unhappy. And I dealt a lot with, what is it that you what are your aspirations, and what is it that makes you happy? And there was a huge disconnect between those things, because they go off into, we used to feed the city, it was in London, where people would go off and do these very individualistic jobs, and it was all about, endpoint of making money, and if I do this, if I do that, then, and I'm sure it's the same in the entertainment industry, that, if I get this role, if I manage this thing, and actually it can feel, well, huge pressure. And actually, if you kind of reframe that and kind of come at it from a different angle, people aren't there to be pitted against. Actually, but I think we're really taught that. I looked a lot about scarcity mindsets. I don't know whether you've talked about that on the podcast before, but actually, there's an abundance. And we even talked about this morning. I yesterday was like, oh, there's competition in this sense, and we're all taught to panic. We're taught to fear a lot of the time, and any touched on emotional intelligence work, fear is like a terrible, terrible place to be operating from, because it's the sort of very primary emotion. It comes out in anger, it comes out in defensiveness, and all those things. And actually, if we can be shifting our whole worldview and mindset to a much more abundant one, and thinking, like you said, and you're brilliant at this, thinking about making connections, how can we give people a foot up? We feel good. It's not even just from a selfish perspective, from an altruistic perspective. Selfishly, humans feel better when they are doing good, when they are connected to people, but we are not taught or asked to connect very well. And I think a lot of people don't really know how to do that. I think there is a bit more of a movement about actually how do we, let's pare this back. What are the skills that are needed for connecting? Because it's oh, I think this is a good idea, but I don't know actually what are the kind of nitty gritty of how you do that. So a lot of the work I do, it's fairly, I run a course in schools for fairly basic skills. You can get into much, more towards the psychology end of things. But basically, how do you, introduce yourself? How do you communicate? And then once you're within a network, how do you manage that? That's what people don't really know much about relational intelligence, but that's really about managing your network, managing your friendships, and that it takes practice. And people are, maybe they've watched parents doing it well, or they happen to be in a friendship group that sort of seems a bit easier, but we'll all come upon it at some point. We'll have we're working with people that are difficult, or find ourselves, we're military, we move a lot. You have to kind of be quite kind of deliberate about those skills, I think, sometimes. Otherwise, it's just winging it and hoping. So, yeah, so that I think, a kind of deliberate strategy to that can be helpful. It seems a bit icky, doesn't it? And you're when I'm talking about relationships, I'm not talking about romantic relationships necessarily. I'm talking all sorts. That actually being more deliberate isn't hey, you want to be my friend? We feel it should be. I think we're taught that it should be very natural and easy, but it's not. People are not easy.
Well, and when we're pivoting specifically to what we're talking about in the industry into entrepreneurship, you are leaving one circle, not behind, but you're having to pivot, you're having to move, you're having to find new people. So you have to be deliberate in that sense. You have to go, okay, there's Nicole and PerformerPreneur. They've got the people that I want to be surrounded with. I'm going to invite myself in. But the beautiful bit about that is that you are absolutely all invited in. There's no kind of gatekeeping with me. But if it's not PerformerPreneur, whatever it is, whoever it is, I think it's really reassuring to hear you say that we have to manufacture some of this stuff. We have to have a strategy. We have to look and see who we want in our circles, who's going to help us get to where we want to be, and then go forth and be brave to do that. So I've got a past episode about confidence and expanding yourself and your circles, and so that you can get to and reach where you want to be. But in terms of circles, that's probably a lovely place to go next, because I know that you do a lot of work about kind of the different circles in in our lives, in our relationships. It'd be really nice to briefly touch on that, because I think, myself included, some weeks and some months, we limit our circles, don't we? We think, oh gosh, these are the only people we need in our life at this time, or, or these are the people we don't need. So, and we did an exercise at the retreat, listeners, with Ellie, and she spoke about the different circles. And it's interesting to see how many people you pile in some relationship circles and not in others. So can you talk us through that? Is that a nice place to go?
Yeah, I mean, I think people call it different things, don't they? Like, I remember living in London, my friends would talk about, you're my on the like the map of London Tube, which line are you on, or which like zone are you in? Or people have like their A and B list, I think, in terms of friendship a little bit, don't they? And I think particularly as you get older, we talk about this a lot, all pulled in so many directions. So I think what we started talking about at the retreat was thinking about, what are your different roles? What are your different the kind of pulls on you, and how does that fit in with managing a network, and having those people, like your core people, who are easy, they're supportive. And we talked about drains and radiators. So if you're not aware of that concept, the idea that some people are radiators, you come away from them feeling so like light but full. I was trying to come up with a metaphor this the other day, and I said to my husband, it's like sushi, where you just feel like kind of full and satisfied, but also not too full. Like he was like, that doesn't work. So tell me if that doesn't work. But you know what I mean? That feeling of buoyancy when you've come away from people. They're who you want in your core group. That you can call up and say, oh, do you know what? I'm feeling this, and they will just listen. And a lot of that comes from people who are genuinely able to be empathetic with you. So a lot of the work we do is about empathy, where we feel seen and heard by those people. And like I talk about it like it's a gift. If we can learn to give people that gift, it's better than any present you could give people, is where actually you feel like someone has sat with you. And if you want to read any more about this, Brené Brown is brilliant on it. She talks about being in a dark room and not needing to turn the light on. It's like they don't want to fix things for you. They just hold you in a way. So that's they're your real radiators. But that can come in different forms. Some radiators for me are people who just energize me. I can feel flat and disheartened, and they just are like, no, you've got this. They're like cheerleaders, really. And then you have other people in your life who like fulfill different functions. So there are the kind of emotional people that, that's often who you can go to and experience a whole wide array of emotions with them, and they've got you on that one. Then you have the more instrumental people in your life. And this actually I find very useful. I work quite often with schools, school children, when they are like struggling with someone in their life. And actually, if you can get them to reframe, oh God, this person's so annoying. You're like, but okay, but actually, do they fulfill a purpose? And sometimes that purpose is, we get into the psychology of they're fulfilling a purpose, but that's not very healthy for you. But often they fulfill a purpose actually that they're just, maybe they're really good because they, always know what homework is needed, or, maybe that person in your life is offering you something that you can kind of see their value for. You can reframe them a little bit on that. Or maybe there's holes. So I think we talked about on the retreat, didn't we? What are the holes? What are the missing pieces here? And if you're moving from one business where lots of people in an industry, and then you're having to start from scratch, again, be deliberate. Like, what are the holes in terms of your instrumental people? What information do you need? I think being I came from a teaching background, I never had to think about money. I just got a nice little salary every month. I didn't have to think about tax, any of that. And it's kind of knowing yourself, and a lot of this is knowing yourself. But what are the holes, and where are those instrumental people who can fill that? So that's one of the circles. It's companionship. I think again we underestimate that. Like good neighbours. Who, my brother's just had a baby, and he was like, oh, I didn't realise how great everyone was. They keep bringing him food, and he hasn't. His wife's had a baby. And actually just people who are just good companions. I think we often miss that these days. I think people are paring back their friendship groups because time is tough, and actually those people who you can just kind of hang out with are really important as well. And then there are the people who provide the sort of more like material things. So are there things that you need? And obviously when I'm working with kids, I'm thinking about, their parents. Are their parents really annoying them? Yeah, but they pay for stuff. Or they give you lifts to places, or, what are the material things that we need in our world? So I talk about a social biosphere. and it's the air that you breathe. This I stole from Terence Real. Again, if you want to read anything about relational intelligence and dynamics, Terence Real is a master. But he talks about this, you've got to keep it healthy. So it's the air that you breathe. And if you don't keep it healthy, if you are not investing, or you're getting things wrong, you're not kind of working at it, then that air that you're breathing, you're doing yourself over there. So I'm rabbiting. Where was the question?
Oh, no, it's brilliant. I'm absolutely mesmerized. And I know the listeners will be too, because it's just so important. And like you said at the beginning, it's something that we don't openly get taught, and we're going to have to find and learn. And you are the perfect person to learn from. This is brilliant. So it's leading me to think about, okay, that healthy oxygen that we're breathing, that healthy circle, that healthy biosphere. And I'm going to speak on behalf of many of my members and my community, we face a lot of negativity, or possibly perceived negativity. Possibly it's not quite as negative as we feel it is, about this kind of pivoting, about changing direction. So it might be interesting to talk to you about that, really. How do we navigate that resistance from our community, from our network, and those kind of negative thoughts and conversations that we're having to face to help us to move forward more positively? Does that make sense? Is that a good question? How do we take other people's thoughts, negativity, opinions, and make sure that our oxygen, our biosphere is healthy by just pushing it away strategically?
Yeah, so I mean, if you visualize that, those people are breathing like toxic air into your world, aren't they? And it's tricky because often those people may have been breathing pretty good air, and maybe they're supportive family members or colleagues, people that you worked with in the industry, and then you are doing something different. So for them, you are choosing to disrupt. And people love status quo in all areas of life. So identifying in a way, and you don't need to give a huge amount of time to it, but identifying, what is it that they're finding difficult? Okay, is that because you're challenging them because you are daring to do something brave that they're not able to do? Do they feel like you've given up on something? Did they like you to have you because you were glamorous? There'll be all sorts of functions that you've been serving for that person or those people that you don't necessarily have made conscious in your mind about what dance you're doing. So we talked, I think, didn't we, about dances, and I love to think about this. Like we do a dance with everybody we're in relationship with, and when you're doing a different dance and they're then like flailing around a little bit, and often people put resistance to this. Okay, so they'll all try to resist you, and it might be that they God, I mean, on the horrible end of the spectrum, like deliberately try to undermine, sabotage what you're trying to do, or it may be just like neggy comments. And certainly when it comes to the neggy comments, or any of it really, this whole idea of just kind of let them, I think is a really, really useful one. Mel Robbins talks about this idea of just letting them. And that's really shifted things for me, is going, okay, that's their stuff. But that's very, very much easier to do if you've really, really worked on why you're making that decision. And I know you do lots of this, really thinking about your values, really thinking about your setup. Like we shift and change. We now lead lots of multiple lives. We aren't, we used to die young. We used to just be, whatever. We had one career. We have many now. And that's what's the genius of your business, is that you're allowing people that next stage, and it's exciting. Hopefully to have done that, you've sat down and really thought, okay, how is this sitting with my values? But I think a thing that people don't spend enough time thinking about is their view of themselves, their like self-narrative, what they're putting out to the world. And maybe they're changing inside, and that's wonderful, but maybe they're still presenting something to the outside world that's allowing that negative energy to come in. Maybe you need to work on actually, okay, now I've decided that I'm doing something different and it feels really good for me. And that's been it's usually a long journey. It's not often we just go, I'm going to change my life. Maybe, sometimes that happens. But actually, how are you projecting that to the outside as well? So that there's a kind of placeholder to it. And I think we talked about, didn't we, the idea of placeholders. Actually, sometimes while you're working on that, sorry, I've got a cold. While you're working on the congruence between what's going on inside and how you're presenting on that outside, it takes time. How can you just give them placeholders? So things like, having statements, working on a statement, like if you've got a particularly neggy whoever who's trying to do something, sit down and think, okay, how am I going to just keep them there? Because there is safe for me. Here is not safe. This is damaging my dream. I need to keep them over there. How am I going to do this in a way that feels good, as good as it possibly can for everyone? And I sort of try and imagine it a bit like, with like little kids, and when you hold their head and they're like flailing around. I mean, you're not meant to do that parenting. In films, you hold them and they're flailing a little bit. You're sort of doing that to them, and then they'll tire themselves out and they get over it. Okay, but if you're letting them smack you in the face, that's not good for anyone. They won't feel good about it. You got a smacked face. So it's about sort of kind of resetting it for everyone, and then hopefully they can actually get on board and be a supporter of you. They can become a radiator. But if they carry on being a drain, get them out. There is literally zero time for drains when you've got so many things going on. If you're parents, and we are that sandwich generation. We're often looking after elderly parents. We're looking after friends who are getting divorced. We've got too much stuff going on to be dealing with people who are not on board with our dreams. So,
oh gosh, Ellie, I've literally got tingles and light bulbs. So even myself, right, for such a long time, and I speak about this in my book, I've spoken about it in previous episodes of the podcast, my nearest and dearest community members know this. For such a long time, I knew what was lighting me up and giving me joy and was going to be my next big thing on the inside, but I wasn't daring to project it. And so actually, and I know that so many of my clients are at that stage, and just you giving us permission to, own it, to say it, because actually the two things coincide. By not doing so, like you're saying now, you're allowing people to have an opinion on it, and that's just going to keep deterring you. Whereas actually when you own it, put it out there, placehold it, present it as is, they will, they won't feel the need or have the opportunity to do and say the things that they do and say that have kept us kind of procrastinating. So that's been a real light bulb. And I can certainly speak from experience now that when you do own it, when you do put yourself in those shoes, and you embrace it and you're empowered by what you want to do, the let them thing really works. Like it doesn't even become a thing. It's just like, I'm on my path, I'm doing my thing, this is awesome. And I couldn't even tell you if the same amount of negativity even exists, really, because I'm not even looking for it. Don't even see it. Could it be less? Could it be the same? I don't know, because I've literally stepped in and owned it a few years back, and as I'm persuading my clients to do. So that's really interesting and really encouraging. And I just love those like light bulbs that empower people to do what they know in their heart they already want to do. So that's a big one for me. This whole conversation.
Sorry, on that, I think also it is a sort of shedding of things and a new identity forms and stuff. But I also think it's like trees, you will come, like, it's not a linear thing. I think you will come back. There'll be like challenges to your self-belief. You'll come across somebody who makes you feel like that old person of you, and you're like, oh, damn it. But don't be disheartened by that, each time you go around that circle, you're getting stronger and you're getting clearer on it. So I just think there are quite often those moments where you feel like you've gone back, but you're kind of going back and you will be going forward. So take heart from that as well.
I love that. Yes, absolutely. I love that. What did you say? Circle each time
like
you
in
get
a
stronger.
tree, like it with you, like
Yeah.
not in a tree. I think you do.
Listeners, honestly, you need to go follow Ellie. She's absolutely amazing. Ellie, while we're talking about that, just drop all your links in as we're speaking. How do we find you? And then we'll put them in the podcast blurb as well.
Yeah, so I'm at Equipped for Relationships on Instagram or LinkedIn, and then elliecollin.com for my website.
Amazing. What are you thinking? Because you know my community, you know me, and you've sort of dipped in and you've seen how we work, you've seen some of the problems. What would be your thoughts, from the outside looking in with your expertise? What things do you think we need to be gifting my community?
I mean, I'm thinking about it a lot at the moment, so it's sort of in my mind, but an extent we haven't really named what we were just talking about, which is about boundaries. So I think boundary work is just so important for everybody, and it will feed out into every area of your life, but particularly when you are doing the brave work of forging out into something different, I think having really clear boundaries around your time and energy is very, very important. And I try to actually like visualize my energy, because it used to, I just gave it away for free. I was just like, "Ugh," and that was part of my personality. And I had loads more then. I think as we get older and we more demands on us, I think you have to like really, really visualize what energy do you have. I know it's not all women, but it's a lot of women in your network, aren't there? Thinking about times of the month, like as entrepreneur, that's one of the things that perhaps may be better when you become an entrepreneur, is that you can actually kind of plan that a little bit. Actually just really thinking about when is your energy, when have you got good energy? When does your energy need to be focused inwards, perhaps more? When can you give? Those sorts of things, I think actually and there's loads of tools, resources for that now. And then knowing that will allow you to have a clearer sense of who are you giving that energy to, having limits around your time, being really, really strict with that, because otherwise you'll go off in a direction and it won't necessarily be benefiting your business. So I think always asking yourself, how is this a good use of my time and energy? How is this benefiting my dream? And I like, you talk brilliantly about this, calling it your dream. It doesn't mean that like it's your only dream, but right now, in order to run a business and to pivot, you have to really like believe and commit to it, because it's really hard. It's really hard. So you do have to just kind of be like, right, even if I'm not 100% sure, I have to just make myself believe in it, and then operate in that way, that this is the priority right now. And it may be that like there are other important things going on. Kind of put boundaries around that time and that energy. And I literally now write down my week, and I'm like, this is the time I have, and it's sacred. And then it means that when I can then really give to my friends and other networks at other points, because I know I've learned a lot from you around this. They're saying, okay, I know that I can't give to my business then. I'm not going to feel guilty about it, because I know that I've given it to those other points. So boundaries around that, and but communicating that, and that's the next piece of the puzzle, is really hard.
Well, I was just going to say that as like that list of how your week looks. Do you share it with anyone? Is anyone holding you accountable? But also I find that I have to, not have to, I choose to, and it works really well for us to have that information open to the whole family. So Nathan and Jack know what's going on in my week. They know, because it's funny, isn't it? People speak about filling their cup, like, oh, how do you fill your cup? What gives? And I definitely do that, and I definitely understand that kind of that thought, but I just think the cup is 100%, and actually you can fill it, but you can't give more than what's in it back out. And so it's that, isn't it? It's that communication. It's saying to colleagues, community, family, this is what my week looks like, and this is where my energy and my 100% is distributed, and that might leave a really small percent left here, so I'm going to need some help, or just bear with me if things don't get done, or if I'm not as present. And so communication, 100% is the key, and I encourage people in the membership to be held accountable. Put it in there, let's communicate it, let's support you. But equally, I also tell them and everybody, like, share with the family who is around you, like you're saying, our networks, our circles, our drains, our radiators. Who needs to know? Is that a good thing? I mean, it seems to work for me, but could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think clarity of communication is just like clarity. Just keep holding on to that, because we can communicate in so many different ways, and some of those ways are really ineffective. And we can feel like we're doing it, and you're like, I told you that, and how do you not know that? And there's a lot of kind of assumption that goes on in communication, and understanding that people communicate in different ways, and they'll hear you in different ways, and it's a complex thing. The only way that you can cut through it is do the work of being clear on and knowing yourself, so that you can, like, and you do this brilliantly, you can say, you can predict, okay, at this point I'm probably going to need a bit of love, and just say, can we book in, like, carve out some time at that point to have an hour's really lovely family time, because I know that will enrich me. and just say it really clearly. What I always did, and I was like, I'm still working on this. I will till my dying day be working on this. It's like just hoping people are going to understand and respect me, and then I get really resentful when they don't. And it's been such a shift for me, actually, just understanding that people don't need a great diatribe when you're a bit emotional and angry about it. And what they need is just really clear instructions. People have all got their own stuff going on. So if you say, and again, that placeholder works really nicely with that. You say, if someone's asking something of you, rather than that, like, everyone talks about people pleasers now, but, that instinct in you to go, yes, of course, or say something like, I'll check my diary and get back to you. Or I haven't got time now, but I will, how about then? You don't want to fob people off. You want to be investing, because that's the whole idea of the network, but it's about making sure it works for everybody. And if it's asymmetrical, if it's not working for one person, then it's not a good interaction. And that's it. I think we can feel like we are being really good eggs by giving too much of our time. In actual fact, that's not it's not long term. It just won't be a good relationship. It won't be edifying for anyone. So actually, just shifting and thinking, saying, actually, what's good for me is usually often good for everyone else as well. And I thought, until really recently, if I was just giving all my time, I've got 2 little children, giving and giving and giving, that made me a good mother. And I think we're all sort of into that, and a good wife and a good family member, and good. And actually, I'm awful when I'm resentful. So actually, I think giving, like you talked about, giving yourself permission that actually it's okay to be a bit selfish, as long as I'm clear about that. No one minds. Okay, if I'm just like, fobbing people off, then they do mind. They feel a bit a bit sidelined. Whereas if I just say, I'm doing this now, but I will give you some time later, or, and actually be specific, be very specific. And I think I read recently, like, people switch off after about 10 seconds. You don't have long. So I used to be like, I'm going to compose an essay to you and you'll feel really valued, and then it'll be okay. No, just straight to it. It's best.
Hopefully that's not true, Ellie, because our podcast is going on. So please keep listening, listeners.
We're covering various different things.
Value. There's some real golden nuggets here. There is 100 golden nuggets here. I'm loving this conversation. I think it's just massively, needed across all walks of life. So please do share it with people, everybody. And actually, it's probably a good point. Share it with people that you in your circles know need to hear this as well. But I've listened to a great podcast. Go have a listen, because it takes 2 to tango, right? We've spoke about the dance. We spoke about this communication, this clarity, these networks, but actually relationships are 2 people. So what happens when you're doing all this work and you kind of have got this understanding, and we're learning and growing and taking on board things you've said, plus much more when we do some more learning and due diligence elsewhere? What happens when the other person's not playing ball, when they're not dancing with us? Like, how do we manage that? Obviously we can persuade people to get on board, but is there a secret trick?
There are some things. It's hard. It's fundamentally very difficult. It depends partly who they are in your life. Do you actually need them? Do you need to do the work? Because it's work. Like we say, life is hard work. Do you need to be persuading people to respect you? Good relationships should have mutual respect. If they don't, and they're not showing any signs, you can't change people, is always the mantra. But if you do need them, and there's everyone's probably listening to saying like, yeah, but it's my child, or or my husband, I don't want to divorce them, whatever. There are things that you can do, and I think curiosity and vulnerability are really, really powerful in any kind of communication like this. So if you can manage to be curious about what's going on for them, it might enable you to be a bit softer with them. And that leads into the second bit, which is vulnerability. If you can actually communicate from a soft place rather than a hard place. And what I mean by that is there are a series of emotions that are very hard emotions, and we feel them, and they're very, very useful because they tell us stuff. Like anger is, often we're taught, anger's a bad thing, but anger's brilliant. It tells us stuff, but it's usually we need to then like dig into what's underneath it. And like I think I said earlier, like fear, sadness, a lot of those things come under anger. But the fieriness of the anger is often to reject people or to try and get something, to a power, to try and elicit a response or a consequence that is often really counterproductive. Whereas actually, if you can come to somebody with more of those softer, more vulnerable emotions, people usually can hear you better. And it's about that. Like you can say all you like, if you're not allowing, delivering in a way that people actually can hear, then it's a completely useless interaction, and it will then perpetuate your feeling about it. You'll have the same fights, over and over and over again. Whereas actually, if you can go small, and it's the same, with dealing with children. Actually, if you fire back, then they usually just that carries on, and then that you might calm down, and then they'll do it again, and then each time again. Actually, if you can go small and vulnerable and quiet, it's usually much more effective. It's people strain to listen. People it disarms people quite often, and so and talking about emotions is hugely important. We don't. This is a lot of my work is thinking about emotional literacy and regulation, and actually, if you can be really, really very specific with the emotion, then people will know what you can then also work out what you need. And telling people your needs again, it's like not expecting them to second guess. Actually, say this is what I need from you. When this happens, and there's a sort of XYZ communication piece that you can do, you can say, so when this thing happens, so, if you're thinking in a business sense, when you don't respond to my email or when you don't pay on time or whatever it might be, I noticed that I feel this. And that's hard in a really professional setting, but, depending on the dynamic. But really, coming from that vulnerable place of saying, that makes help, I respond in that way because of it. Actually, could we try and do something different? Here is how it might work better for me. Here's people don't want to do the thinking of it. They just want to be told what to do. So I'm offering you something that's going to work better for me and it's going to work better for them. And then it's up to them what they do with that. That then you have to then go, okay, that's up to you now. I've done my bit.
Well, you're eliminating the expectation piece, aren't you, as well? And I think that's some of the biggest problems is that expectation. I think we've touched on it throughout the conversation. So that's a great way of managing that, and being clear, setting it out, and that XYZ formula as well. And you can hear straight off the bat there that would work in all kinds of situations, be that business, relationship, home, children. So that's really, really useful. Do you think, Ellie, that this stuff is like, I don't know if it's the circles I'm keeping, the growth that I've gone through, the age that I'm at, that this feels more prevalent at the minute, or is it just that because of the age and the time of life that I'm in, or is it something that is seeming to filter through now? People do know a bit more about this. I feel like we're teaching our children a lot more of this.
Yeah, when I started looking at this stuff 15 years ago, there was nothing. There maybe have been something. I think America have been a little bit ahead of this, and that they've got much more of a kind of discourse around thinking about yourself and your inner world and stuff. And then I think the Europeans are perhaps a bit more natural about talking about their feelings. I think a very sort of British masculinity is very bad at this in one way, and there's I won't go into too much, but there's a lot of gendered stuff around this about the kind of the way that we're expected to be. Women, and it's still with parenting, majority of the emotional conversations and modeling comes from women, and so the more men can be doing this, the better. But there is again, like you, my Instagram feed just filters, there's a million dad accounts now on positive emotional learning for their children, which is great. So yeah, I think there is a huge movement on this now. And I like people like Mark Brackett. If anyone hasn't seen his work, he wrote a book called Permission to Feel, and he's a researcher in California, and he came up with this whole approach of teaching emotional literacy in schools called Ruler, and it's about regulating and recognizing emotions. And I don't know how long he's been working, 10 years probably, on this, and it's filtering down schools. So I think primary schools are doing this loads. Secondary schools, less. And certainly in workplaces, I don't know how much this is, because we're dealing with, in the workplaces, it's generations who just didn't have this stuff. It was just like, just suck it up, talk about football with them, But a male friendships is massive, but it's not. So there is a real gendered aspect to this, I think, which we could go into a whole other time.
Well, and I'm just thinking, this has been absolutely awesome. Like, I couldn't have asked for a better conversation to start the thinking for my listeners. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. And you can hear and see, if you're watching on YouTube, listeners, you can hear and see Ellie's expertise in this. Ellie has got a business that takes this information into workplaces, into schools. And, I'm pretty sure she'd be open to even more podcast conversations and visiting communities and speaking about this stuff. It's so important. So I'm going to plug you, Ellie. Like, please, if you are listening and this is starting to, intrigue you, excite you, you've got people that you think need to hear this in your circles, in your world, in your school, and please do reach out to me and I'll direct you over to Ellie, or head straight over to Ellie, because we'll put her information down below. But I just feel really passionate, Ellie. Like, I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, this is so awesome. It's such a big topic. I would love for more people to hear and know what you do, and to not just listen, but to learn. Let's get you out there. Let's learn. It would be fantastic if you can come into the membership and do a little workshop on one of those amazing pieces as well. I'm sure the listeners who are in my membership would absolutely love that. It's been a ride. Like, I feel all energized and excited. It's important. I think you've been the perfect guest expert to bring on and enlighten people about this topic. It is something that I know performers possibly feel that they do a little bit better because of our training, like this communicating bit. But then with that comes this kind of arrogance that we do it and it's working. And what I feel you've told us today just kind of pushes that boundary of, let's keep learning, let's keep growing. We don't know it all. We're not doing it all perfectly. We do have some confidence and some communication skills that we've been taught that we can take with us into our next pivot, profession, idea, dream. But actually, the bit that I really want people to hear and to listen to is that there's so much more, and it's evolving and it's growing, and it's a life's work. And so don't ever stop, listeners. Don't ever stop listening and learning and going on that life journey. And you've been a perfect person to remind us of that, Ellie, because that was very complex, but very, very clearly put, and on layman's terms, actually. Like, I don't feel baffled at all, and sometimes I do.
Teacher. Well, thank you for having me. It's been great.
Let's just drop your socials again one last time, and and then I've got a big feeling that everyone will be flooding over. They'll be silly not to. Go learn from Ellie, everybody.
Thank you. Equip for Relationships on Instagram or LinkedIn, and then elliecollin.com, my website.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. Okay, guys, that's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed the show. Thank you for joining me here on the Showbiz Side Hustle Podcast. So until next time, please do take a little bit of action, that very first step, and make sure that you are doing something for you and your Showbiz Side Hustle this week to move you forward and get you heading quickly and swiftly and strategically towards success.